its presentation, I usually just try to talk about my journey from the military into entrepreneurship. And, essentially, if I can do it, I think anybody can do it, because I'm not the dumbest person in the world. I'm certainly not the smartest, and I figured it out. So I have a company called Veteran Compost. My name's Justin. So we'll just talk about my background, not to brag about myself, just so you can know where I'm coming from. We'll talk about the company and its kind of evolution. And then at the end, maybe this time we'll spend a little bit more time talking about really challenges that I faced and some advice that I would give if someone was looking to get started. So about me, I only have like 6 pictures from 10 years in the Army, and they're all goofy. So here's me on a tank in Mosul. The way I came into the Army was ROTC. So, day I graduated college, raised my right hand, and boom, I was magically in the U.S. Army as a second lieutenant. So I was a combat engineer officer. So I did IT stuff in college, did combat engineering and a lot of IED work when I was in active duty and the Guard. And then now I do composting. So well-rounded or disjointed lifestyle, all in how you tell the story. But, fun travel and adventure. It's what the Army is all about. So got to go to Korea, Kuwait, and Iraq. And then after 5 years on active duty, I'm originally from kind of the Maryland, Pennsylvania area. And unfortunately, there aren't active duty combat engineering jobs for people in that area. So I wasn't ever going to be able to come home. And so I decided to switch to the Guard, did that for 5 years. And the day that I switched was in, I came back from Iraq and I switched in 2009. Probably should have watched more CNBC and been paying attention to the macro economy. There were no jobs. So 4 months after being in Mosul, I'm unemployed, which is humiliating, like to come home and admit to your friends from home or college or your family that you're secretly taking unemployment payments. So, you can get angry, you can get sad, you can blame other people, but like after a while, got to do something, right? So it's time to drive on. And I'll talk about at the end about education, but I got stop lost in Iraq for most of the time I was there. So that paid for half of my MBA. So I put myself back in night school at Penn State, getting my MBA. And I picked the college, if anybody's ever using your GI Bill. I talked to the people at Wharton, and they said, well, we'll take everything you got and clean you out financially, but to come here. And then Penn State, with the zip code it was in and my setup, I essentially went to grad school for free. So that's how I ended up at Penn State. So if you're looking to go to school, don't lose money on the scheme if you can. The school you went to is only worth so much, and for me, it wasn't worth my life savings. So found myself unemployed. I was always drawn to sustainability, right? But full disclosure, I drive an F-150 and I eat steak. I had lamb chops on Easter. So I'm not all in on the environment, and I'm not green enough for some people. And then other people, I'm the greenest person they know. So I, like a lot of things in life, I think I'm somewhere in the middle. But I like composting. I like the idea of taking waste and keeping it out of the landfill. And as time has gone on, more and more, I really enjoy what we make. I enjoy the soil science and the products, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But, as you look around, you kind of think, well, what are the things I'm passionate about? What are the things I like? And can I make a buck doing it? And when I looked at composting, if you look at any chart of trash in America, 2/3 of what's in the back of every trash truck is compostable. So there's all this raw material. In Maryland, there were only 2 other guys doing it. So literally the day I got my permit and opened, I was the 3rd biggest operation in the state, and they both went out of business within a year. So for most of the last 13 years, I've been the only private compost operation with a permit in the state of Maryland. So long story short, discovered composting, Googled and learned everything I could, started an LLC because that's what you're supposed to do, right? And then I signed a lease. And when I signed my lease, I had no customers. I had no employees. I just had the money in my pocket from when I was overseas in the Army, because I didn't want to ask my grandmother or my family or friends for money. And if this thing didn't work out, have really awkward Christmas conversations for a decade about that time I lost everybody's money. So my runway was as much money as I had saved while I was gone. So the first 6 months I was in business, I'm paying all these bills for the rent. I don't have any employees. It's just me. And in 6 months, I made $350. And that is not profit. That's $350 in total revenue in 6 months. Like, couldn't get anybody to sign up for my service. couldn't get anybody to buy my products. It was a disaster. And it all started to click in January of that year. And, quick story on that is, when you're trying to get started, no one owes you anything, right? So you got to get out there and prove it. And I got a call from a restaurant and they said, "Hey, we're composting, but the guys never show up. Would you be interested?" And I said, "No problem." And so I'll be there tomorrow at 9. And the next morning I show up at 9 a.m. and it was icy and snowing. And in Maryland, that usually leads to disaster, but I just left early, took my time, got there, and their heads exploded when they said, "It's 9 and you're here." They're like, "It's snowing out." I said, "Well, I said I'd be here, so I'm here." I said, "That's what you wanted, right? The other guys don't show up." We signed a contract on the spot, and that's how I got my first customer. And then once you get one, no one wants to be your first customer. Then I had someone to go around and say, "Well, I got these guys working with me." And then the next customers started to roll in right after that. So, the hardest part's getting going. And now if we fast forward to today, we hired more people, and then I've just bootstrapped my way to where we are now. So we have 2 facilities and 26 employees. We do 7 figures in revenue. And we're like a legitimate business somehow after all this, after all the mistakes I've made. So go figure. On here, the 3rd facility is currently stalled. I guess that's what we'd call it. So the lesson learned, as we'll talk later, and challenges and advice is, I signed a lease with Anne Arundel County government. They brought me to a property 5 years ago and said, "This is a great place to build a compost site." And I said, "Great, let's go." And we spent 5 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And when the week we were ready to open, the county executive changed his mind and took our lease away. So that's why it says currently stalled. So we're working with the county executive to find resolution there, because I've only ever gotten one grant in my life as a business owner, and it happened to be this project. So the state of Maryland was my partner in all this. And so the state of Maryland is asking, like I am, "Hey, Mr. County Executive, what's the plan here?" Because we got a lot of taxpayer money rolled in with Justin's money on this project. So I have been assured that that will be fixed shortly. So hopefully next time I give this presentation, we do have that 3rd site. That'll allow us to double our business. So if we open that 3rd site, if you look on a map, Anne Arundel County is in between Alexandria, Virginia, and Aberdeen. So it really allowed me to stitch together my 2 businesses. Because I want to just hire people and grow the business. And what the business is, probably haven't even covered that, and we're 10 minutes in, is we collect and compost food scraps, right? So we do residential in the DC area. We have roughly somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 residential customers in the DMV. And then we do a lot of small commercial in DC. So office break rooms, coffee shops, schools, things like that. And then up in the Baltimore metro area, we do what I would call heavy commercial. So we're doing dumpsters and large bins, places like the Raven Stadium, Wawa, Wegmans. I'll name drop at the end here with a long list of them, but we collect all that food waste. I'll show you in some pictures how we compost it. And then we make all these products. And like I said, the products are where I really enjoy being these days, especially in the springtime: compost, topsoil, hanging out with gardeners and farmers as we start to grow stuff for the new year. So our main facility, it's up in Aberdeen. If we were to zoom out, we're walking distance to a Rita's Water Ice and a Taco Bell. So we're kind of right on the edge of the burbs. It's a 30-acre farm. We lease about 5 acres in the buildings. So most of the area is fallow, and we use a very small area actually for the composting. And, we are unique in that we produce the only organic compost in the state of Maryland. Previously, farmers have been buying it from like North Carolina and Vermont. So we're seeing a lot of growth in like our organic certified products, which is new in the last year. So I think that's going to be a big thing for us growing forward. And then our second facility, it's like a much smaller facility. We do in a week what our Aberdeen facility maybe does in half a day. So the capacity is much smaller, but because our drivers are flying around to these hundreds of stops a day for these little buckets at people's doorsteps, we actually employ more people at the smaller facility because we have so many drivers in cargo vans that if you're out and about in DC or Northern Virginia on a day, you'll probably see one of our vans scooting by, servicing people's home compost bins. And most of that compost is either given back to our customers twice a year in the form of bags of compost, or used on site. And the site we're at now, because we had to move in the middle of COVID from our previous farm, but the site we're at now is we're with Arcadia, so co-located with Arcadia in Alexandria, Virginia, literally right next door to Fort Belvoir. So it was not my plan to end up on properties adjacent to military bases, but somehow We ended up in Aberdeen. We ended up in Fort Belvoir. And that's a great thing for us is our compost is used on the farm by all the folks in the veteran farming program and the incubator program to help grow new crops. So the compost has a pretty cool home there at that site. But how we make money, like I said, we collect from folks. Material drop off is becoming bigger. So like waste management, a lot of haulers bring dumpsters of material to us. So the hops from Heavy Seas Brewery, leftover produce from Imperfect Foods, all kinds of folks like that. We get dumpster loads, tractor trailer loads brought to us on a daily basis. What we compost is a little bit different than your backyard. We can do meat, dairy, fish, things maybe you wouldn't do in your backyard pile because of odors or pests. We can do those because our piles get really, really hot and break all that stuff down safely. So as an example, here's our bin at a hospital. So folks throughout the day are filling up the bin with all kinds of good stuff, some fresh basil, or greens there, all kinds of food ends up on the loading dock. Our drivers show up with a truck to swap the bins. Clean bins are what we drop off, take away the bins that have material. Back at our place, we're dumping it out. So we have a concrete pad where our staff's dumping everything out. We don't have robots. So all the trash and contaminants we're picking out by hand with $9 gloves and $20 rubber boots. So we work really closely with our customers to make sure we're working with the right places. Like, for example, I no longer service any restaurants, too much trash. And then we're always on the lookout because you as the buyer, you don't want trash in your compost or your garden mix. So we're always on the hunt for contaminants. We mix the material with wood chips and onto the compost pile. And the pile at the bottom here that has all the kind of white papery debris on top, that's our active pile. So we have pipes and blowers that are put into the pile. I thought there was a picture. And we're forcing air in the pile. So it's a huge 8th grade science experiment. If we provide oxygen to the pile, your food waste today in 72 hours is at 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And so at that temperature, the microbes are breaking everything down. We want to get to that temperature just like cooking a turkey. So we destroy all pathogens. And within 30 days, we're done with that active phase. Everything is fully broken down. So we'll screen it at the end of the belt. The nice fine looking stuff you want to buy is there. And then we'll cure that. So it'll go in some large windrows and be stored anywhere for 3 to 6 months until it's ready for sale. So this time of year, what we're screening right now in April won't be ready till July. So our spring season's going and essentially we've already made our supply for the spring. So now we're just in the process of getting it all out the door. So we make, like I said, organic compost. And like anything in farming or other industries, compost kind of becomes a commodity. So we want to set ourselves apart either by certifying organic for some of our product or making value-added products. So like a raised bed mix, our compost is $39 a yard. Our organic is $49, so we can charge a premium for being organic. But our raised bed mix is $175 a yard. So we like selling raised bed mix because our margins are great on that product. So, all these value-added products allow us to charge a higher price. And even though there's labor and ingredients that go into it, we still have higher margins than just the compost itself. Notable customers, like I said, name dropping people. It's interesting the places we end up, because there's food waste in just about every workplace. So places like Google and Facebook doing their break rooms. We do the Coast Guard is one where we do supply a lot of compost to the Coast Guard for their grounds maintenance in Baltimore. In terms of challenges, so like number one, you got to just learn the business world. It's not that complicated, but anything you can do to take classes, whether it's a community college or something else. In my case, I went and got an MBA, which I thought was really valuable because I just had to get in the business mindset. The SBDC, I feel like I'm always promoting that resource. So Small Business Development Center, it's free to use as a US taxpayer. So I loved the SBDC as I got started. And right now I'm working with a business coach from SCORE, which is free. So SCORE is another great resource that, every 2 weeks I'm meeting with my business coach and he's helping me stay on track with my, strategic planning for the business.